vamos a pasar a la siguiente ponencia, que se llama Pass and Security Audit, y va a ir de la mano de Shasa Grybyuk, que espero haberlo dicho bien otra vez, Cybersecurity Risk Advisor, vCISO, y nos va a compartir ahora una información pues muy interesante. Muchas gracias.
Hello, everyone. Can I just ask a quick question just to measure the audience? Do we have security leaders? If so, raise your hands, please. Auditors, security managers, IT managers. Come on. Students, I think we have a few, right? Okay, that should be enough. Any executives here, top management decision makers? Okay, great. Nobody's going to judge me. Okay, let's move on. So let me introduce you this major problem that I had back in my life. And I started, I think, with audits around 2012, 2011. My first one was SOX audit. And for whatever reason, I just passed it. Our company was acquired by a public entity in the United States, and we just passed the audit. In fact, passed it better than other child entities of the same organization. And at that point, a lot of things that we were doing in IT were just intuitive. We just thought, okay, it's good, let's do it. But never bothered to ask ourselves questions. What did we do there that led us to that successful pass while the other parts of the organization just keep failing and never able to pass? Let me just give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm about 20 or so years formally working in IT. Before that, I was a student and doing crazy things like hacking, trying to study programming, not in a workforce, but just doing it for fun. And since then, I've been living and breathing information security and slowly evolving in there. I've been working in various industries, mining, healthcare, consulting, banking, fintech, and that experience allowed me to gather all this information and pack it in a, let's put it this way, in a diverse environment, in a diverse framework that I started applying all over my practices. I'll be honest with you, I have some of these certificates, but when I took them in ISACA world, they gave me quite a bit of knowledge. I wasn't able just to get that knowledge and merge together. So eventually I was looking for someone or something that can help me to piece all these puzzles together, or this Rubik's Cube with all those fancy colors in the multi-dimensions of cybersecurity. So eventually I came across a person. His name is Dr. Eric Cole. He used to work for SANS, was advisor to Bill Gates, US presidents. He's a CIA hacker back in the past. And that guy helped me to frame what I'm going to show you today. Eventually, 6 months being coached by that person allowed me to create my own framework, or I like to call it a strategy that I keep on applying every time I get engaged with any kind of organization. Doesn't matter whether it's a public sector, private sector, you still follow the same principles and you eventually get to that good world-class security without worrying about being compliant, and compliance just comes automatically with it. Let's jump in. Setting the foundation. How many times have you folks have entered executive meetings or management meeting and tried to present information security, and you just see people stuck in their phones, checking Facebook and this and that, and simply not listening? I'm pretty sure quite a few of you have been in this situation. I've been in this situation as well. I do a lot of security awareness trainings, and that's how I measure myself. When I start getting boring, I see people doing other things but not listening to me. So eventually, I start changing my tactics. So let me think, what can I present to these people so it will be more interesting to them? What is their pain point that I can address? And one of the first things that I started to work with is decision maker education. So decision maker education is probably one of the top issues that we have to face as information security professionals, because if they're not buying into our strategy, what we're trying to sell them, what we try to ask in terms of a budget for security controls, if they're not believing us, we're not going to move any further. If we are moving any further, we may not be as efficient as we want to be. So what do we normally would want to communicate to these individuals so they understand us better, they understand themselves better, and what needs to be done? One of the things I try to tell them is pretty much what drives organizations to have a good security. And that typically is compliance. Compliance is one of those things that governments, clients push on top of us and force us to buy all these fancy technologies, put them in place, and say, yeah, we're good, we're protected. But in reality, the compliance does not automatically grant you good security. Yep. The other component is security breach. So there are situations where organizations just haven't cared about security, and all of a sudden they get breached. They run into your office and say, listen, we just got breached. Whatever you need to do, tell me the number, I'm going to write a check. So they give you this budget to get that pain out of their head. That's also a treacherous way to go, or direction to go. So I'm going to sort of give you instructions of how to avoid those situations and actually spend that money wisely, whatever they're willing to give you. The security breach is just one thing. It usually hypes. They want to address security right here. That's this importance to them. And once that's passed, it drops again. And you're all over back into non-compliance just because organization is not funding security team appropriately. And the final category that I barely encounter, there's one company that I work right now with, they really wants to get security in place just because they want to be secure. It's just being risk aware. They understand their risks, they understand their exposure, and they simply want to make sure that their executives have an answer to the question, are we secure? As yes. Unfortunately, there's no solid answer to that question. It usually depends. Yes, it's a very dangerous answer to give because that gives them false hopes. So in order to tackle that question, if they do want to understand whether they're secured or not, we want to start off by simply explaining a proportion of distribution of security investments versus functionality. So one thing is critical to understand. If you are going to secure something to 100%, it becomes literally unusable. So if we're picking up, I don't know, like a glass, right? It's available to me right here. I can pour some water into it. There's zero security. Nobody stops me from doing that. However, if you put a box, lock this up, 100% security, I cannot get to it. So the purpose of this glass and the water here, being here, is just defeated. So it's not available to me. It's all secured. I don't even know what's in that box, but I cannot use it. So we want to always balance, and that's one of those things we want to convey to the business folks. You cannot have 100% security. You will be vulnerable at certain places just because you need to do the business, you need to make money. However, you may have at some point a VP runs into the office and says, we just bought new ERP system or CRM or whatever. And all of a sudden you realize they haven't consulted with you, you haven't looked at the weaknesses of that system, you haven't compared, you haven't risk assessed, and they pretty much took your Rubik's Cube of those colors and just shuffled. And it feels like they were shuffling it whole night. Then you have to come back again and start reassembling it. And who knows how long it's gonna take you. So your security got degraded because they all of a sudden introduced all that availability, all those tools into organization, and you now from beginning have to reassess, okay, where do we now invest money? Can our controls cover those gaps or not? Now, also we want to dip business decision makers into reality. So today, in today's world, what happens if you get breached? If your organization gets breached and you're a security leader, normally the result is following. If that breach is so high that it just almost puts organization out of business, chances are leader is going to get fired, security leader specifically. But unfortunately, that doesn't solve the problem. So the organization lost their security leader, and they're going to have a hard time hiring a new one because it's so difficult to find the appropriate talent. So what we need to tell them is, in today's world, we have so many threats out there that it's just impossible for us to protect against all of them. And as a security leaders, we are responsible for all these assets. And you can see boxes over here that represent organization assets, but we have only limited budget. And we need to think how we're going to spend it wisely so we can protect the most precious assets and maybe protect less the other assets that we can sacrifice. Now, the reality is we have all of these things that we need to take care of. Attackers, and those of you who are in a pen testing business, they can validate me. Attackers just need one vulnerability. If you have one vulnerability, if it's even small vulnerability and they get their foot in the door, chances are they will pivot and get to your crown jewels and breach it. So it's an unfair game. We got to protect everything. They just need to find one way in. That's all. And I don't know if somebody has unlimited budget to address that, please raise your hand. I want to work for you. I don't have those unlimited budgets. And when I advise something to the clients, I go straight to their assets. Okay, tell me how much each of these worth so we can spread out your resources adequately across your enterprise. Next piece of executive education or decision maker education is to explain on what are the targets there. Most common targets are either servers or clients. On the servers side, it's usually that one system that sits out there, nobody knows about it because previous guy left and didn't tell the other person who took over. It's connected to the internet, it's missing critical security patches, and it contains critical organizational data. So that's what attackers would normally go for, and this is a sweet spot for them. If you've been in this situation, too bad, but the situation is not dire. You can always correct them. You can put a whole bunch of controls in there and separate that data, patch it, and make the company aware of this information. The second target is clients. Normally it's what? Email, links, malicious attachments, and people just clicking silly things on the internet, right? That is another target which is frequently being exploited by attackers, and in most cases it's social engineering happening there. Another piece of information that normally is not communicated to the business leaders is the foundation of cybersecurity. Typically, that would be availability, integrity, and confidentiality. There are additional couple components here that I dropped, which is privacy and safety. But for simplicity's sake, let's focus on these three. Privacy and safety, that will come sometime later. So CIA is the foundation of InfoSec. And we typically learn about it at early stages when we are just trying to get our certification, to get a foot in the door and get a job. And a lot of folks I see forgetting this and leaving that, collecting dust on the shelf. Now, in my practice, I use this from start to beginning. I make sure my clients are aware of this, their business leaders are aware of this, and they understand what can make the greatest impact to their organization in the context of these three items. And finally, I don't know about you folks, but I've been sometimes called to fix TVs in the companies just because I'm a technology person. Security folks may be called to fix a lock on the gate. That's not really what we're there for. But I want to kind of set a definition for what is actually cybersecurity for every organization. The cybersecurity, without using the word security, is about understanding, managing, and mitigating risks to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of critical assets or critical data in an organization. Yes, that may involve fixing the lock on the door, but if you are a security leader, you may not have that skill set, so you need somebody on your team to help you out with that or outsource it. So that's it for executive education. We don't need to complicate it more than it needs to be complicated. Unfortunately, in our jobs, we got cyber so complex that when we come to the board meeting, they try to hide from us, like we brought the wildfire into that meeting. We want to keep it simple. It's not that we have to drop them a book on C-Risk or CG, C-Guide, whatever those certifications, they don't need to read it. We're here for them to communicate it in a simple form. And I just gave you a few slides there that you can start off your journey with. By all means, you can go and improve it. Can compliance mean a good security? So I kind of touched on this at the beginning, but here we will expand it a little bit. Can we afford to comply? So one of those questions that I'm facing frequently, especially for small organizations where we're talking like 10, 15, 20 people, they don't typically go for compliance or any kind of security controls just because it's usually expensive. And I'll tell you a secret, all of these answers can be yes, and even with a zero budget. So I'm gonna take a pause here, because sometimes people are not really understanding what that means. So let's pretend you're driving on a highway in the car, right? And you get in a crash. You may have purchased insurance to compensate for all those losses, even some health impact. Or you may have accepted that risk and didn't purchase that insurance, and now you're in for a lot of money to spend to cover that accident outcome. That's the same thing with the information security. It's a business choice, whether they want to invest money into protection of their assets and get that good world-class security in their organization, or they want to accept all the risk and move on as is by keeping this glass of water available to everybody who wants to come and use it. So that's why I'm saying you can even achieve good security with the zero budget by not literally implementing it. And the best example I can give, there was one organization in an unnamed country, unnamed organization, and they got breached. They lost 300 gigs of healthcare data of people who came to get the COVID vaccine, and the penalty was $1,000 or 1,000 euro at that time conversion. And when I looked at this scenario, I'm like, you guys don't need any security. You're already secured. So the compliance with the government regulation was strict, but non-compliance was just 1,000 euros. I mean, any organization can afford that. That's like normal losses that like operational losses that we incur on an annual basis, I mean, even monthly or weekly, some organizations. So $0 security is possible. Now let's jump right into the meat and potatoes of this. So this is a little framework. I'm not sure if you folks can see this, but that's a strategy that I typically apply. So let me step aside so everybody can see. This is a strategy that I apply when I engage with any organization, and it's not mapping to any framework. I'll be honest with you. When I created this, I haven't even read ISO before I created it. I haven't even read NIST. I was just throwing all the thoughts on the paper and then combining them and crunching them into the two sides. So left-hand side is all the business activities that security leaders must do. On the right-hand side are technology activities that security leaders must be involved in, or at least understand to a certain degree. You don't need to be a guru in network engineering or AI or cloud technologies. You just need to understand enough to communicate it from technology or geeky language into the business language, and back from business language into the technology language. Now, when I created this diagram, I have like actually a video of this. If I put all the arrows here, it's gonna be like a rat nest of things connecting there. So I just put this one arrow, that means a translator. So literally we are translators for the business. Let me go on a high level through this diagram, and then we will deeper dive into each one of these components. So I usually approach information security by layers, both business layer and technology layer. First one, I try to deal with the business first, and that's understanding the business, because if we don't understand the business, anything else that we do is not gonna be efficient enough. We're most likely gonna be wasting money. What most organizations do that I encountered when we try to engage with them, they are jumping straight into this right-hand corner at the bottom, roadmap, and start implementing controls. Tell me what control I can put in here so I can comply. And that's where most organizations overspend money and really don't get to that compliance state, or sometimes even fail it, just because they haven't gone through all these other steps. Frameworks like ISO would probably cover most of this. Some frameworks like SOC 2 would cover mostly the right-hand side, slightly touch the left-hand side. So you can pretty much throw any type of a framework onto this and work with it. However, it's just more of a strategy, not the solid set of controls that you need to do. Sometimes you may not even need to implement some of these. So understanding the business, just getting understanding of their goals. What are the business objectives? Top-down view of security. Understand current metrics. What do you measure security performance with? Understanding mission statements. A lot of information we can extract for our security controls from that mission statement. Org chart, that's an important component, and I'll expand on it a little later. And understanding profit and losses within the organization. Because if you are throwing all your resources to protect something that's at loss, but you're not protecting profitable assets, that's a waste of resources. Now, on the right-hand side, and I'm going to go in order how I structured these slides. On the right-hand side, we got foundation for basic controls. When I work with the clients, I typically tell them, if you don't have this foundation in place, there's no point to jump into the roadmap. Even when I do risk assessments and I see they got no security, they cannot get their asset inventory in place, okay, let's stop here, get this stuff done first, and then we will move on to all other additional controls. Once again, there's no point of decorating the complexity tree of cybersecurity with fancy toys if you cannot effectively use them. After that, we go into alignment. It's important to start aligning security or technology with the business. And for that, I'm leveraging CIA again. You remember the triad? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability? You're going to be surprised, but if you will ask your executives how they view it and how technology folks view it, most of the time it will be drastically different. And later on, I'll give you an example of one of my encounters in the past. Prevention versus detection. I don't mention it in my future slides, so I'm just going to pause here for a second. If you look at all of your controls in the organization, most of them will be either preventive or detective. And it depends how and what you're protecting and what's your strategy. Like, let's say if you're investing in zero trust, you need things to be available, but you want to make sure that zero trust is in place. You're not trusting anything outside of verified identities. You may want to ramp up your detection capabilities. So any controls you would want to be investing in would need to have be dominating on the detection side, while protection will go down because you want your stuff to be more accessible. However, in most organizations, you would have slightly more preventive controls over the detective. And the distribution can vary depending on your setup or what you are trying to achieve. Optimal would be around 60-40 distribution, but once again, there's no set number. It's subjective to the org. And from right-hand side on layer 2, we shift to the risk management. Notice we're not even getting into all these fancy controls yet. Risk management is where we try to get all the inputs from the previous 3 blocks and start analyzing. We put everything through our thought process, what we learn from a business, what we see in terms of assets, some basic foundational controls, and start building that risk register before we even select the controls to remediate those risks. Then we move down to the value. So once again, I'm not hopping into the controls there. We start looking at what we can generate in terms of value immediately to the business, whether it's communicating metrics to them in a much better way, or give them a documentation so we can start build up the compliance with ISO or whatever. The ISO is a very complex framework, so we need to get that documentation running before any controls get in place. And also, we're trying to transform a thought process of every individual and organization. The thought process there would be critical assets. That's what we need to protect. We need to put it in the risk perspective, and we need to also take into account CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What's more important to the organization? And only after that we go into the roadmap and try to figure out what are the controls to offset those risks a little bit. So I've been rumbling for quite a bit about this slide. Let's deeper dive into each one of them. I'm gonna drop slide number 4. Sorry, not slide, the block number 4. It's continuous improvement. There's too much to talk about that. For sake of time, we're not gonna discuss it in this presentation. So understanding the business. These are lists of questions that I find the most effective when we, as security leaders, try to understand what are we actually there for, what is our purpose, and what we're supposed to do. First things first, we want to make sure that we're going to get a business alignment. And I grouped them by small segments here. All these questions are applicable to a certain group of individuals, and I'm going to elaborate on that in a little bit. Do executives get enough information from security to feel assured that they're secure? And we asked this question to executive team. The first time we just got hired into organization, our first meeting, getting together with the business leaders, that's the question we ask. Do you feel you're secure? And try to get that honest answer from them. Does security understand business enough to enable it? So we don't want to put a control in place that's going to halt the business. And then when executives come down the hallway, you ask, okay, what do you think about security? They say, you're the guys who stopped me from doing my job. Okay, if you get that answer, you're doing something wrong. We need to enable security. So for example, in my practice, we ask the customer, why you even need to comply? What are you trying to achieve that? Oh, we want to enter some other markets, and they require some government compliance framework to be implemented. Okay, then we can help you to enable that. That's how we want to approach the security. Are all departments and business lines supported adequately? We don't want to spread out resources in a way that is not commensurate with the benefit the business gets from each of those lines of business. So that's very important to get that feedback from our business stakeholders. The second block, tech alignment. Let me tell you something. Everybody on your security team, if you wake them up in the night, Miguel, wake up. You ask them any of those questions, they need to be able to answer it immediately. What business is organization in? They need to understand what they're in. Are you providing the healthcare services to the patients, or are you a financial services? Where does business make, or how does business make money? We need to understand our cash flows. So those are the ones that we're protecting. If this is a government organization, it's an easy answer because the taxpayer is your supplier of cash pretty much. So you need to make sure taxpayers are satisfied with the results of your security work. What are the key processes as well? Who are the competitors? Who are we competing against, right, on the market? And what are the differentiators? How we are better than those competitors? What are the key threats? So usually that information you would be asking executives, they will give their input, and then we as security leaders must translate that input to our security team. So they also are guided by these foundational questions. Top down of security. How do executives use cyber? What are the biggest risks and exposures? What can have the biggest impact to the organization in the context of CIA? So that's an important one. We will open up on it a little later. What is your definition of being secured? Some people say, okay, I just want things to be available and I don't care. People can steal data, people can alter it, but as long as everybody can access it, we're good. Some people say we just don't want any data to be exposed to outside. The next one, current metrics. The metrics are very interesting because a lot of organizations, they will try to measure security, but nobody really got that sweet spot of what actually tells the business they're secured. And we will talk about this in a bit more detail. Mission statement. I already said before, mission statements sometimes provide you a lot of information that will guide you in terms of your behavior as a security professional. So for example, in the company I work for, Lyrical Security, our mission statement is to provide enterprise-grade security to the medium and small businesses at the affordable cost. And the way we do it is through automation and talent. Organizational chart. That's another big piece. So I want to kind of stop on this for a little bit. Within org charts, you need to understand where security sits. And here are some red flags that, let's say, if you're in the audit field, you can immediately pick up on and start digging in to see whether there are any gaps. So typically, organizations have security that is born from within the IT department. And that's where security stays. For whatever reason, business folks think, okay, security deals with technology and technology is IT, okay, it'll sit there. But the problem with that is, and we go back to the CIA triad, so confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If we're gonna be honest, IT is predominantly about availability. It's about keeping the lights on, keeping systems running, making sure everybody can access them and do their job. Now, having security under that, it's like looking at the world through a red filter. You just put it to your eyes. Yes, you see stuff, but you're missing certain colors. That is not drawing you the good picture. So every time security is going to report something in terms of confidentiality or integrity, it will be looked at by the CIO through the lens of the filter of availability. And that's how it will go up to the executives. That will influence their decisions. So there's an inherent conflict of interest of IT, security being underneath of IT. Ideally, not ideally, in an okay situation, we want to have them at least on the same level, whether security would report to legal, HR, operations, doesn't matter, as long as they're on the same letter as the IT. However, in the future, potentially security is going to take over the IT, and the reason for that is, once again, CIA. In the security, we're responsible for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And availability is our information technology. So we're putting IT underneath of it. Let me run through this quickly. Ensure foundation is in place. So foundation, asset inventory. When we go into any organization and say, show me your inventory, or the auditor would ask, they would give you IT assets like laptops, servers, routers, firewalls, you name it. In the security world, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for business assets, and business assets have not SLAs, the downtime tolerance. They have a value to the business in terms of when it's not available, business is losing money. We want to know that value. Change control process. You need to have change management. Before you even think of going for compliance with any kind of framework, you need to have change control. That's it, period. Like, it's just not negotiable. Configuration management. You need to understand when configs change, what changed, and whether you need to roll back or not. Data and asset classification. Once again, that's going to determine the importance of your assets, what controls those assets need to have in place. Vulnerability management. Today, I don't know any organization that does not have that. If they do, great. If they don't, they immediately need to have it. Data discovery. So you need to know where your data moves and how it moves. Executive view at CIA. So this is an important one. So you folks tell me that I'm out of time here. Like, period, we cannot move any further? Okay. If we can, let me try to rush through this. So when we go to the business folks, we ask, what is your view? If you are going to be attacked, what is going to cause the greatest harm? And you give them 100% pie chart, tell them, split me that 100% impact. And it could be availability that they value the most, or it could be confidentiality or integrity. Depending on how they give you that information and what it is, you will start structuring your controls in that fashion. The next one, we're shifting to the risk management. So this is usually a straightforward process. We assess the risks, analyze them, prioritize and acceptance as sort of a treatment plan already at that point. But eventually, all the risks must come up to the business risks, and that is something that ISACA's C-Risk certification talks about a lot. Now, how do we assess these risks? So this particular way I learned from the CIA hacker, and it helps to if you have no risk management at all in the organization, and you just want to get something out there and try to understand what you have and what are the impacts, what are the likelihoods, just in a qualitative way, that's your path forward. So you meet with executives, ask them, give me top 5 business assets, and they will give them to you. You ask them to prioritize them. You get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 priority. The next one, based on those priorities, you go with your security folks and say, what are the threats that can impact those assets, and give me them prioritized per asset. After that, you go down to your tech team and start working on vulnerabilities. So basically the technology itself, say where we can get, what technologies those threats can exploit, and give me the root causes of them. Also prioritize. Now the benefit of this approach, in the end, you will get that huge list. The reason why you don't want too many assets, because it's gonna be a big tree. But some of those vulnerabilities that will be common across, and you group them up based on the priorities. And eventually you will get that prioritized list of vulnerabilities you need to address, and that becomes your roadmap. On the left-hand side, however, the column is basic business impact assessment. So that can be leveraged in the future for DR, DCP plans, and your incident response plans. If you want to go a little bit deeper, you may want to use a FAIR framework for risk assessment and analysis. That is something I started using to get the more into quantifiable risk management rather than using qualitative approaches. I just gave an example here of what it looks like. You can research it outside of this conference. Now, qualitative versus quantitative. In risk management, we typically get used to risk matrices. However, there are other ways of measuring these things. So the problem with the risk matrices, we get range compression. If, let's say, we need to measure risks that can result either in very high losses or very low losses, that is not displayed in a risk matrix. On the other hand, in a quantifiable approach, it's sometimes hard to quantify something that's not tangible. Let's say client loyalty, the loss of that, it's hard to quantify, but still possible to a certain degree. The other problem with the matrices, everybody has its own his or her own understanding of what is low meaning, what is high meaning. Now, that's how risk matrices look on the left, many of you familiar with. With a quantifiable approach, if you're going to present a risk in dollar figures and probability, that's how it's going to look. And here I gave you a quick example of how I do it, where red line there is business tolerance for any impact. On the top, you will see the dark line, that is the inherent risk after risk analysis. And the light green line is the residual risk after we apply the controls. And if we plot all those probabilities and losses into this chart, let's say if you take the risk matrix and can convert it into the quantifiable, you will see that sometimes you will get these risks way higher than the actual tolerance, and that should trigger some conversations within the boardroom. Guess what? The business folks, they would prefer more something where you talk in the dollar figures rather than colors and low, medium, highs. That's something that we doing at Lyrical, and we get amazing executive feedback on this. How do you report risk to the business? Eventually, you don't want to come to the business decision makers with the 50-slide presentation and show them all sorts of security issues. You want to have 3-4 slides maximum, showing only the meat. They don't need to see what you're doing underneath of it. And what you want to do is pick top 4-3 risks, depends on your resource availability. Prioritize them. Give the likelihood. That's how much is the probability of this risk to materialize this year. That is what it's going to cost to the business if it materializes, and how much I need to fix it. Give them top 3. List additional risks. Say we have only resources for top 3. Can you approve us the budget? They're approving it. They may go and say, yeah, I'll approve for all the risks you listed. don't fall for that, because usually you won't be able to complete that. Okay, so let's take a pause here. I wanted to run through a few more sections, but I think we're out of time. And any questions, folks, thus far, if you have, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, we can discuss it after the presentation.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Any questions? I know I've been talking a lot. Okay. Thank you.